everybody. So, welcome back to another episode of Real Talk Uncensored. I'm your host, August Witt, and our guest today is Kelly Puls.
Hello,
Kelly,
everybody.
how are you doing today?
Good. How are you?
I'm doing fantastic.
Awesome.
So, you have a little bit different story than most of our participants here
Yes.
because you are not a participant. Your sister is.
Yes,
Can you talk about that a little bit in her story?
absolutely. So I'm really blessed to be able to attend these meetings with my twin. So my twin and I were 43, but we talk about how we're the original womb mates. We're
Good
fraternal
point.
twins, so we're definitely not identical. We have a foot difference in height. I've got green eyes, she's got blue eyes. We're definitely different souls, but we definitely are still connected. But we've seen a much different path in life. We've walked different things and different choices and walked different ways that have separated us in many ways, and one of them is alcohol. Uh, Granted, both of us have had experiences with alcohol. It's part of the experience, I feel like, as being a human being, but unfortunately, some of us become more addicted than others, and unfortunately, that was the path that my sister was given. And unfortunately, there's a lot of pain and heartache that comes with someone that you're so close to when they're dealing with alcoholism, because the last thing they want to do is be close to you, because you're the one that's going to point out that, hey, something's not right, something doesn't seem right with you, and they don't want to hear that. So it's been a hard part of the journey. So it's really huge that this program even exists to help people to find themselves again, because not only does it heal the person, it heals the family too.
That's so true. And I think you're in the place that you're in, you really understand what we do so well because you like what we do is helping people obviously, and that's what you've been trying to do with your sister for how long was her stretch of
Oh
alcoholism,
gosh.
would you say?
I think we calculated, oh gosh, I might get this number wrong. And if I do, I'm sorry. But we're talking close to 20 years,
Mm-hmm.
really, when you think about it. It goes back to, even early experimentation with alcohol. I think it's catered to us through marketing and consumer retail. And unfortunately, some of us get stuck in that trap where we think we're only happy if we're numb, whether it be with drugs or alcohol or other things. And unfortunately, sometimes that's the only happiness people find outside of regular pleasures of joy in life. So unfortunately, it's just an existence that is a reality that we face, and it's hugely marketed to people everywhere. I mean,
Oh,
you go to
especially,
gas
I mean,
stations, you go
yeah.
everywhere. It's right there in your face.
I understand that completely. Just as a college student, like it's the culture that we grew up with. How like that's what you do in college. You party, you drink, and then, or after high school, same type of thing. And there's a
Mhm.
lot of people who that the culture, they get so surrounded by it. That's all they know. That's all they do.
Yeah.
And then next thing you know, you've developed a problem, and you're not even aware of the problem or aware of what you're doing. And
Yes.
I mean, yeah, it's a sad truth for thousands of people out there, for millions of people out there with alcohol and just drugs in general.
Absolutely.
And it is it is really cool though, in the sense of because you've helped your sister and now she's recovering and now she's coming to Fountain Youth every Tuesday for real talk and going strong.
Hmm.
You're put in a unique position where you've seen someone grow, and I think that's what I want to talk with you about today is kind of how that how, how that entire journey affected you, and kind of now that you've gotten out of it, um, kind of what you've learned from it and how that can help other people who are going through the same thing, watching somebody that is keeps making the wrong decisions and you're trying to help.
Absolutely. And I think that is exactly the door that we kept running into with Christy's recovery. We were
Mm-hmm.
there. We were trying to be there. And we'd show up. We'd try to settle any arguments or help them to, get sober in different situations, and the violence and oh gosh, the negative attitudes, the toxic relationships that developed because of alcoholism really led down a spiral that we never knew how to respond well to. So you have this person that you love, and you have different ways of loving them, whether through tough love or through, we're not going to do this and that. So you have this very vulnerable situation where you have a relationship on the line with this person that you love. And if they're drunk and they're happy with you. And if they're sober and they want to drink and you won't give it to them, well, then they're not happy with you. And so relationships definitely are affected. And not only does that have a ripple effect into their own families, but also into their community and their workplace. So you run into doors that you're like, how do I respond? And I think that's the beauty of the Fountain of Youth, Real Talk, and all the programs for Partners for Change is they take a look at the whole person and they address those really tough topics that we try to bring up. But it's always that case of it's easier to hear it from someone else than your own family. Because I think we can tend to look at ourselves when we have family members and it's like we know ourselves so well that we can point out each other's failings and we don't want to hear it from our parents. We don't want to hear it from a sibling, because you might have heard it your whole life growing up. And it's like, don't judge me, don't criticize me. I don't want to hear it from you. But when you hear it from someone else, from the outside looking in, it has a different impact. And that's one of the major components that I've seen a difference is that Fountain of Youth brings those hard questions and those hard topics up in the meetings. I mean, everything that we've heard from all these people, all different walks of life. You walk in feeling like a failure and you feel shame, but yet you come in and you're still just like everybody else. And I love that there's not just one single type of people. There's every walk of life in this room when people are talking. You've got all different backgrounds, different race of people. You've got different income levels. I mean, we're not talking just one group of people that are affected by this. It's everyone, and I think we all have a personal journey affected by it, whether we're rich, whether we're poor, whether we're white, black, Asian, it doesn't matter. We're all affected by it because it exists in our communities, but thankfully that's not what you experience at Fountain of Youth. Nobody sees your race. Nobody sees your religious background or your economic background. They look at you're a person and you have a purpose and you have an addiction, and we want you to find your purpose and your identity without that addiction, or help you to recognize that it is a part of your identity, but that it doesn't have to control your life and ultimately lead you to destruction. Mm-hmm. And that's the beautiful part is they talk about your dignity and your worth and help you to manage those tough questions that sometimes these people have accepted lies to, which is what my sister has brought up many times. She goes, I just thought I was worth nothing. I thought I was never going to get better. So what's the difference? This is at least better than being dead, and those are conversations. I'm like, oh my gosh, please don't, like I would be devastated if, because suicide unfortunately is one of the hardest topics to talk about with this, but when they're that low, because not only does addiction take over their life, but it takes over their money, their relationships. They start to everything, yes. And it's a devastating toll on everyone around them. And so you begin to think that that hole that you've dug yourself into isn't one you're ever going to get out of. And so it's hard to find hope. And yet Fountain of Youth and the Partners for Change write hope right into the plan of care for them. They write into their dignity and their purpose, and they help them to dream again. I think that's the cool part that I have found is my sister takes a look at herself in the mirror a lot differently now again. Where she thought she was just this failure and full of shame and full of ugliness and not worth anything. Now she's starting to realize, oh my goodness, these people never left me. My family never gave up on me. This group of people at Fountain of Youth never not showed up for me, even if I didn't show up for them. There's this unconditional love that I think society has lost in their very being. If someone hurts you, you run away. If they're not good to you, well, then you need to set a boundary. And those are healthy things too, but I don't think as a society we set that standard for people to have healthy boundaries, but still love the people unconditionally. And I think, again, that's where Fountain of Youth is so valuable because they're not looking at anything other than you're human and you have value, and we want you to find your worth again and your purpose in a job, in a life, in a family, and go live and exist again without carrying the weight of all that shame and guilt again. That's huge.
I mean, I can agree more. Like when I think about the Fountain Youth, I just think about how it's a community, especially on Tuesdays with Real Talk. I mean, that's one of the first things that I noticed when I started here is how much I loved going to Real Talk because that's what you saw. You just saw people who had problems, but they want to talk about them. Yes. And that is one of the strongest things that I think personally that you can do to help yourself is to talk about the problems. And and even if you don't have the same problem of somebody else, it's just seeing that everyone's going through something.
Mhm.
And when you really start to understand that as you were saying that we're all human, it opens up things in you that you didn't even know were there. Have you had those moments coming here before?
Oh my gosh. I so I'm Catholic and Christian, and so we teach and we talk about love thy neighbor as thyself. And I know that for some people they haven't always had those experiences with religious people. They maybe are faced more with judgment and criticism. And yet when you come into real talk, people feel so willing and able to just throw it out there, the ugly, the raw, the real. And that is so humbling for me because I think, gosh, we as Christians could learn so much from this group. And that's what I value so much is I don't care where you're from and I don't care what you've done. But the fact that you can be so real and honest and genuine about it makes me have a different response of compassion towards you because instead of your arrogance, instead of ego and pride getting in the way, we get to see the real person. And that's what happens in that room with all those people. And it's incredible. It's absolutely incredible. The people feel that comfortable enough to be that open. I mean, I think how could we not respond in love if people could just be that genuinely honest? And then if they respond in honesty, then we can respond in honesty and say, "Oh my gosh, I had no idea that that's how you felt. You put up such a big wall with your sometimes people I know with our situation with my sister, she put up such big walls to make it look like she was fine, that everything was fine and that she had it under control. That for us, we responded differently because we didn't see beyond the walls. We didn't realize that those walls could be taken down or that we would be given access beyond them. And that's what real talk does. It takes down walls and lets people be vulnerable without being attacked,
Yeah.
which is huge.
Which is what everyone needs, and that's why, like, I've seen how Real Talk has helped people spread that kind of unconditional love and understanding. It starts in the room and it only spreads outward.
Yes.
And as you were as your um as your sister went, like, get started recovering, um how did that affect you? So is what I'm kind of curious about, how you saw it and what you did to help her the best way
Mm.
that you could.
That's a great question. It takes a community, it takes an army to help each other out. So I definitely wasn't alone in helping support my sister. Thank God she had her kids. Thank God that my parents were there, and I was in a unique situation where my husband unfortunately passed away. And so I was a caregiver for him. He had ALS, Lou Gehrig's disease. So I was not as able to be involved with her recovery process until recently. And so somehow God uses all things out for good for those who love him. And I love that God opened that door for us so that I could be a part of it. But there was definite hesitation with her at first because sometimes I think we as Christians, people think we criticize and judge. And thank God we're taught that is not our job. We don't have to do that. So it's just trying to let her know that I love her, even though this is happening or that she's been through this. So I think when you start to see change, you gain hope, right?
Yeah.
You start to look at the person differently and go, oh my gosh, could we really be on that path to recovery? Because we've had downfalls, I think everyone has with addiction. There's times where you relapse and it's hard to see them recover and relapse again because you're like, oh my gosh, the path is just so painful and hard to see not only them go through that, but then to also try and help pick them up from where they're left in that path of destruction. And so, but she really started to show us and be real with us as she continued to go to the meetings. When she first started, we could tell she was just going through the motions, like, okay, let's just get this done, and then months later, she really started taking it seriously. And I'll never forget, we were camping and there was a time where she was trying to recover and she had a massive seizure. And it was from trying to detox, and it scared the heck out of me. I thought we were going to lose her. I had never witnessed something like that before, and it really shook me. It really made the reality of her illness a reality to me that I had never realized was so bad. And so once I saw her in that vulnerable position and she started to recover, it was like, oh my gosh, this is not good. Like this many years of this addiction is ultimately taking away her life. And of course, I don't want to lose another person. You know, you learn that love is and time is so valuable. And she started to realize that for herself too. Like, I'm never getting better. This is getting worse. It doesn't matter what I do. And so, thankfully, with the help of doctors and this program, you know, unfortunately, you know, going back to jail was really hard for her and for us, you know, because nobody wants that for someone that they love. But unfortunately, it was the reality of her situation and it was the wake up call that she needed. And so, with that, she started opening up to us a little more and a little more and started trusting us a little more with some of her broken past and some of the wounds that we didn't even know still existed from her past when we were growing up. And as that continued to happen, those conversations continued. And then that opens the door to forgiveness and acceptance. And it's baby steps. I mean, you've got to really be careful and tiptoe around those because those are really vulnerable wounds that have been there and festered for a long time. And thankfully, we're grateful that she was willing to say yes to this program in a way that she embodied it and opened herself up to these people. But again, if these other people had not been here and opened up themselves to it, I don't think she would have felt safe enough to be that person again. And so, really, Partners for Change and Fountain of Youth, they're the ones that helped make this possible. I really give all the credit to you guys. I mean, yes, I did my part. I've been in there, I've been trying to support her, but ultimately, her and I couldn't have those conversations in a healthy way. And now we can. Now there's this safe space between the two of us where we can be connected through her recovery process that allows us to be vulnerable, allows us to forgive, and allows us to move on, which is huge, just so huge.
It's the best thing that can ever happen to somebody. I mean, I talked about it with Grant a little bit yesterday, how when going through something like that, whether it be as an addict or trauma, it it requires like a restart. But to get to that restart, you have to have the process of going through hell, and everyone's watching you go through it, and you're gonna have your lows, and you're gonna come right back down again.
Yeah.
I mean, which is the hardest thing to watch and hurts, but I think what it kind of sounds like is she kept on going through that process, and that's what eventually helped her realize that she wanted to really get out of it and decide to get out of it.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's the hardest process you can watch, but I think that's what a lot of people are going through right now is they're in the process of understanding and getting to the point where they want that restart. And I kind of wonder like what more can be done to help people get to that spot earlier instead of having to go through even more and more years of pain.
Right, right. Gosh. And everyone's so unique and different and made from such unique backgrounds. You know, I think if everyone knew their true value and that they have purpose, I think that would make such a difference. But so many people come from different backgrounds. You know, a lot of influence comes from our parents and how our parents were raised, you know, and that's brought down to us. And granted, we can make changes with that. I mean, we don't necessarily inherit all of that, but there is a reality of that too. Like what you're brought up with, you think is the way it's supposed to be. And slowly, as you continue to grow up, you realize other people have different situations that they grew up with, and it could be this or it could be that. But ultimately, it's our choices. I do know that in our family, if our parents had abandoned us after we made bad choices, we wouldn't be who we are today, you know. So I really think family is so important. You know, unconditional love is really not taught. I think self-love is really important, but I think self-love to an extreme of ignoring the family members, friends, and loved ones that have been put around you is really a deficit. So humanity is ultimately all of our purpose. Humanity is something that we all are called to walk in and to support each other in. And I think that's exactly what Fountain of Youth does. I think they look at the whole person and they look at the whole continued family as well, because we've got every single person, whether it be a grandfather, a father, a mother, a sister, a friend, a brother, a cousin, you know, we're all affected. one way or another, good, bad, or otherwise. And so it's whether or not we're willing to look at each other and say, will you lay down your life for each other? That's one thing that it's worth showing up for them, because if you were the one person that walked with them, what if that's what made a difference and let them to recover? I think many of us run away because pain is hard. Watching people struggle is hard. And sometimes we can't mentally handle it ourselves because some of us are carrying really heavy things too. But I do think if we would just continue to say yes to our family, continue to say yes to, I'm going to be a part of their change, not to enable it by any means or to encourage it, but just to be like, I'm still going to be here. I'm still going to take your phone calls. I'm still going to show up for you. You can still come to my home. We'll still have meals together. We'll still do all this together. It's choosing to never give up on them, ultimately, making a commitment to each other. And that's what really brings people out of it. They eventually figure out that all the other things that they were told would fix everything in their life and make them happy took everything away from them, and they look and they see that those people that are still standing by them are the ones that actually truly love them.
Yeah. Yeah. I couldn't agree more. And as you said that, I thought more about how like everything that you went through while your sister was an addict or an alcoholic. And I want to ask you a little bit how that really affected you, and if there was anything that you were going through at the same time, and how hard that was if you ever almost gave up on her, which is a terrible thing to say, and obviously you didn't.
Right.
But how that really affected you.
Absolutely. So no one is out of it. So if it's your family, everyone is affected. Nobody gets a buy or a pass on it. So when you know that something's wrong, first of all, I'm a mother, so I want to fix it.
Mm-hmm.
That is my personality. I want to be there. I want to take care of things. I want to fix it. But there's things that you cannot fix, and you have to be humble enough to accept that. There would be times where her kids would be affected with the alcoholism and the drinking, and there would be times where I would need to be with them, and I would pick them up and I would keep them with me for a bit just to give them a place that they could just calm down and relax. And it was hard. It was hard. But I knew that that was my purpose in those moments, was to be that safe space. And thankfully, they had a place to go, which is beautiful. But it is stressful, right? It's really hard. I remember sleepless nights, and I'm a prayerful person, and there was a lot of surrender that I had to give to God. And I go, God, I can't control this. I can't fix it. I can't do anything. And that's what I ultimately wanted to do. I wanted to fix it. I wanted to make everything right, and everyone would be happy and everyone would be peaceful, and we wouldn't have any arguments anymore about this. And ultimately, I had to be humbled and realize I can't fix it. My sister is the one that has to choose to fix it and say yes to being a recovering addict instead of being an addict. So ultimately, the stress was very heavy on our family. There were lots of arguments, lots of fingers were pointed. And so you start to feel guilt, like, oh my gosh, am I the cause of this? Did I do this? Did I cause this? And so you begin to second guess yourself and your abilities. And I think the ripple effect of that is ultimately brought down to my spouse. My husband definitely heard, and we, all the different stressors that I had with the situation. I was like, gosh, I keep praying. I keep asking God to save her. And I just don't see how this is helping, and I didn't realize that continuing to show up and say yes was exactly what God was calling to me to in those situations. You can't give up. But the stress was there. We did have some sleepless nights when there was nights that were rough where she had been drinking too much and she had gotten violent. And, your parents don't know who to turn to either. So we turn to each other. It's the four of us. And so we try to carry each other. We try to help each other out with those situations. But ultimately, when it came down to the point where we had to get the police involved because the violence was just getting too extreme and too dangerous for everyone involved, it's the hardest feeling to have to call the police on someone you love, and you want the very best for them. You want to believe in the very best in them. And yet they keep making choices that go contrary to that. And it's hard to accept that. because you don't want to see your family member or loved one in jail. You don't want them to miss out on family functions and different things that where you normally would be making beautiful memories together. You don't want them to not be in the pictures because they're in jail, like you just don't want that for them. And so you try to be there for them and say, okay, all right, well, she's going to get better. We're going to keep supporting her. We're going to keep doing what we need to do to help support the kids and the whole thing. And you keep trying to make sacrifices and work around your budget and your schedule to help them out. And yet ultimately, again, we were humbled because it did not do what needed to be done. We had to be humble and remember that we are not in charge. She has to make decisions, and those have to cooperate with the jail. They have to cooperate with the police. They have to cooperate with healing and recovery and sobriety. And we couldn't force her to make that decision. She had to make that on her own. And that is really hard. You have to let go and let them do it, because ultimately what we were doing wasn't helping. If maybe we were hurting it more, and we didn't realize that at the time. But by going to these meetings, I've heard a lot from a lot of people who have been really raw and honest about it, that they just wanted to be loved. They didn't necessarily want to be fixed. And that's not really what Fountain of Youth and this Partners for Change is about either. It's not about fixing them. It's about helping them to see who they truly are and who they were created to be, and that this does not equal who they are. And that's what I value about it too, is it doesn't take their past and determine what their value is. It takes their past and says, you have more value than this, and we want you to see it. And that's so different than the world is teaching us today.
I mean, like, after hearing everything that you said, it's something that I've thought about a lot, trying to help people. And I've seen some people of my own go through things, and you just want to fix them, like you said. But really, the best thing you can do is just keep loving them, as hard as it is. But in a way, it's almost simple, because you just keep loving them and supporting them, and you're gonna watch them go through hell. But you know that if you just keep supporting them, it's the best thing that you can do.
Yes.
And it's going to be hard, but it's kind of through that hardship that you almost grow closer, in a way, because at the end of the other side, you've shown how much you care, and that's the most beautiful thing you can do. It's that love. Could you talk a little bit about your connection after she recovered?
Absolutely. Yeah. So continuing to say yes. So in loving someone with addiction, you keep inviting them. You keep calling them. You keep texting them. You keep checking in on them. You just continue to do that. And then eventually, thankfully, that healing started to happen in our relationship. Instead of being worried that I was criticizing or judging or looking down on her, she started to realize that I actually really care. And sobriety is huge when it comes to your mind starts to gain clarity again. It starts to get a real understanding of reality. And they can receive love again. Unfortunately, when I love Caprice used the term walking dead syndrome. When you walk around with addiction, you have this barrier put up with drugs, alcohol, whatever it is that you're using, that will numb you and your senses from receiving true love. But once they start to go into sobriety, God bless you.
Thank you.
Yeah, they start to receive again. Their nerves, their sensory, everything starts to waken up again, and then they can receive love. So her and I, we could text each other. We could, so we do families at my house, or families. We don't do families. Family. We could do family time at our house. Yes. Gosh, let's get on track here. No, we do holidays at my house. Right. So I was grateful that, again, she would come to the house with her family. We could celebrate family holidays together again. We could do family dinners together again. We could go on vacation together again, without that fear of relapse, which is huge, because then you can enjoy the moment with them as well, instead of feeling, and I didn't realize I was doing that. I was so tense and scared and nervous that I was just kind of waiting for everything to fall apart. And I didn't realize that I had discovered that I had, what's the word? created a habit of that. When I was in her presence, I would be nervous and I would be scared for her and for everyone because I was afraid of, oh my gosh, what if this is relapse again? And what if this is a response set? Or what if she's having another seizure? Like, I didn't realize I had been put on such edge and awareness and alertness that I was actually hurting our relationship to a point that I was too cautious.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, instead of just enjoying the moment and the conversation, I was just looking for all these different things, trying to prevent things from happening. Again, trying to control the situation. But thankfully, that's not what we're walking in anymore. And it's sometimes just preparation, right? Like, okay, we're gonna have the holidays. A lot of people like to drink at the holidays. How can we love you in that? Like, okay, we'll just make sure, whether it be having drinks, whether not having drinks, or what is your favorite drink, or what can we have that's special for you? Not trying to single her out. We don't want her to, we don't want it to be a show either,
Yeah.
but it's also looking at the hospitality. What would make you feel comfortable, Christy? What would make the situation more comfortable for you? And a lot of times her response has been, please don't make a big deal of it. I'm ready for this. I'm ready for change. I don't want to be kind of narrowed down on do everything for me, just do it like you normally do, and I will be just fine. And it's like, that is so nice.
Yeah.
You can breathe differently around the person. You can
You can
actually be genuine with them
you
and
can
real.
relax and be genuine. Yeah.
Yes. Yes, which was huge. So that makes a big difference on family holidays because we get probably about 20 of us together. And so it's wonderful that we can enjoy food and drink together. She's a great cook. She makes some of the best dishes, or like one Thanksgiving, she made this platter of vegetables in the shape of a turkey.
Oh,
It
that's
was
awesome.
excellent.
That's
It was
awesome.
so awesome. I was
That's so
like,
cool.
I love that we get to see this side of her again because she was creative and sensitive and compassionate and caring before the addiction had taken over her personality. And so now we get to see this person again. And it's just so cool because she brings so much to the world with her compassion and love and sensitivity to others that to see her numb and see her the complete opposite of that was just hard to get close to. But then to see her recovering and to see her come back into that is like, oh my gosh, where have you been? Like, come back. It's like, this is great. It makes the holidays so nice. Tuesday nights have now become like family night. We go to the meetings. My girls stay with my mom and dad. We go and we visit after the meeting. Like, it's our family night. Like, we have dinner together afterwards. Like, when we talk and we catch up, like, once a week is our family night. And we always get together after the meetings here. So, I mean, this place has really brought healing to more than just my sister. It's brought healing to our entire family, which is huge.
Yeah. I yeah, wow. Oh, that's incredible. Um, as you have been going to the Fountain Youth and to these meetings and talking about um having like your family time afterwards, I'm curious if there was any ever things recently maybe that you've picked up from Real Talk that you've brought back and implemented in your own life in any way, or some things that just stick with you.
Absolutely. So it sounds crazy. I know people are like, why do you go every week? Like, do you really have to go every week? Some people question things,
Yeah.
and that's okay. They're not questioning things, they just want to know. They're genuinely curious. And I go, I wish you understood that these meetings aren't just for addicts. These
Yeah.
meetings are for the whole person.
For everybody, every
Every,
single person
yes,
can
every
take
walk
something
of
away
life.
from it.
Yes. Yeah, we all need those reminders. We all need to be clued in. Like for me in this stage of life, I'm a widow, with 5 kids and trying to support my sister with her sobriety and, be there for my family and my husband's family and my kids. And so there's different pieces of the real talk that I did not realize would affect me. So Caprice will be sitting there and we'll be having these conversations. I'm like, oh my goodness, I needed this just as much as she needed this because it tapped into a different facet of my situation. Granted, it doesn't look like addiction, but it looks like grief. And so I get to walk out with this different mindset. Many times I'll take a picture. Grant makes a beautiful board with these
Yeah.
different landscapes of discussion topics and the lies we agree to and different things that we want to grow in and how we want to get to or where we want to get to, excuse me. And I think, isn't that beautiful? Because really all of us need to take on that mindset because all of us get into dark points. Even as a woman of faith, there's some times where things get dark. And yet those discussions and those topics that he maps out on those boards for us really takes every single human being down a path of recovery, whether it be forgiveness, grief, acceptance of a situation like being a widow, accepting that in life. And so it's incredible to me that God uses even this to reach me. And I love that this group has received me, because I could see where some people would be like, why is she here? She's not an addict. Like, why is she here? She doesn't belong. And yet that is the exact opposite of what I've experienced. People are so kind to me and so receptive of me. And I think, gosh, they could easily like say, get out of here. And they don't. I just love that they accept me. And I think, gosh, this world could learn a lot from this group.
It's that support. It's that we're all here for the same thing, but for different things. We're all here to love each other and want to be the best version of ourselves and support each other.
Yeah.
And I think in many places in many places of the world that's missing.
Yes.
And I think it's partly because in some ways we've gotten too big of our communities, so that it's harder to support one another because we're so big, especially in cities. And I think Dubuque's small enough in a way where that that hasn't happened as much, thankfully.
Right. Right.
But it it begs the question, what can be done about these huge cities that have lost that understanding for simply community and connection with everybody in the community and supporting one another.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I think in many cases we see a godless society. As a faith based person, I believe in God. I believe in loving thy neighbor as thyself. I believe in forgiving others and showing mercy. And I feel like what we give, we get back in return. Do unto others as you would have done unto you. And those are all biblical truths that we've been taught through God. And I think if we could find that faith again, we could also find hope. And I know not many people would resonate with that. I know that I had wounds with our faith when I was young too, that I was like, oh, I don't believe in God. I don't believe in faith. Like all of them are a bunch of hypocrites. I don't see them walk in the faith. I don't see them helping thy neighbor. I don't see them, so I think that we have to be called out as society members and community members. Like, are you loving thy neighbor as thyself? Are you really looking at the needs of them, or are you trying to keep up with the Joneses? Are you looking selfishly, or are you sacrificing for others? I think a godless society shows fruits of people not loving each other. And you find broken families, you find broken relationships, and broken communities ultimately as well. But yet, when you have, for me, with God written into my story, I see where I have purpose in looking at humanity. I have purpose in supporting others in their struggles. Because ultimately, with my situation, when my husband was ill, we had a 1.5-year journey with ALS. And people laid down their lives for us, whether it be watching our kids while we went to appointments, whether it was people dropping off meals for us, people that came and helped do yard work, people that just really bound around us and loved us in that really, really tough time. And I just think, everyone's so busy. Everyone has other things that they have to do. How did they find time to love us in that? And yet, when you look at your schedule, when you look at your time, you really ultimately do have the time, talent, and treasure to give to others. And the cool part is when you do that, you get joy beyond understanding and peace. And yet, because you get to see them not struggle as much. I mean, I think when we see other people struggle, we want to just help. Like we have this natural longing and yearning in our hearts to like, hey, can I get the door for you? Or I saw this beautiful couple at lunch today where her husband was in a wheelchair and she was feeding him his salad. And I remember that was what I needed to do for my husband when he was ill. And I just thought, that's what we're called to do. We're called to love them. Make sure that they're fed, make sure that they're clothed, make sure that they remember that they have dignity, and talk to them like a real human being. And with humanity, I think we definitely have the capacity to love beyond the limits that we kind of set on ourselves. And sometimes it isn't big acts. Sometimes it's just little acts of love. Like, hey, I thought of you today. I brought you a coffee. How you doing? Or even just a little text message or a phone call. And I know that my sister and I have been able to develop that kind of communication, which is, hey, I'm having a really rough day. Could you just talk to me for a bit? Yes, absolutely. Because whatever we have on our hearts, we need to learn to have conversations that don't discredit those feelings, because feelings are feelings, right, wrong, or otherwise. It's how do we navigate them,
Exactly.
right? In a respectful, law-abiding way.
Yeah.
And there are solutions. We don't have to do it alone. Isolating ourselves, I think COVID gave us a very, very hard glimpse at
Mhm.
having to be isolated and having to be home alone and realizing that no, we can't do it alone. We need community, we need friends, we need family, we need everyone to help each other because when we do, everyone wins.
I dropped the mic on that one. Instead. Yeah. Wow. I mean, I think every single person needs to hear that,
Yes.
which is kind of funny because as we wrap up a little bit here, one of my last questions for you, which you might have just said perfectly, is one message for the world if you had one. Um, it could be that if you want. It could even be a, it could be a message for those who are in your situation who watch who has someone that they love who is going down a bad path, and what's your message to them to get through it?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
One of my favorite saints, Saint Teresa of Calcutta, Mother Teresa, she talked about how people would come to Calcutta to try to help serve the poor and to help the sick. And she would look at those people and thank them with great charity. And she said, "Love the Calcuttas where you live." We all have neighborhoods, we all have families in our communities that are struggling, and we also need to look at them. Sometimes we travel far and think, oh, we'll go on a mission trip. Those are beautiful things, and I'm not discrediting them. We as Americans are really blessed. So if we can share our resources, our time, our talent, and treasure abound in other countries, that's beautiful. But we also need to look at our communities and see how can we serve those that are our neighbors. And one of the best ways that we can do that is if we can look in the mirror and say, I love you to ourselves. The second greatest commandment that we are taught is to love thy neighbor as thyself. Take a look in the mirror, choose to love the person that you have been entrusted with yourself, and then you can respond in love to your neighbor.
I love that. I think that's a great way to end. Thank you, Kelly,
Thank you,
for
August.
being here today, and this was fantastic.
Thank you so much for having me.
Of course.